This book right here, I think, is written on dementia because it talks about how we forget that everyone is a part of us, a teacher sent to teach us more about ourselves, unconscious aspects of ourselves. And the most forgetful part is that we separate ourselves by deciding that someone is wrong or not being able to see ourselves in that reflection. I think this occurs in most relationships that we experience. This is the most deep relational book that I have ever read, and I will probably continue to read throughout my life. But it talks about, I always talk about divorce and dementia. It talks about this little passage in here. It's going to mention the tiny gap. And the gap is an illusion that it says that we fill between us and the other. Instead of remembering that we are just aspects of each other, reflections of each other, we decide to put this gap in between us and have certain thoughts about certain people. So it's just like divorce, or a splitting of a relationship where you have these thoughts about this person. You're like, I hate that this person does this. Why do they keep doing this? All these little thoughts and things that you think about a body of a person, instead of remembering that we are all like spiritual creatures on the inside, just here to learn and grow. And a lot of us, all of us, we are just like little children on the inside, wanting to be loved and nurtured. And we forget that when we get into these, when we get distracted, when we forget that we are spiritual bodies, we start to see people as just simply for their body and for the mistakes and their flaws. And all that is wrapped up in our ability to forgive and to see ourselves as spirits rather than bodies. And, forgetting that there's no gap between the minds. The beautiful relationship you have with all your brothers is a part of you because it is part of light himself. This passage, this part is from the Ark of Safety, and I do change and skip around a little bit. Either there is a gap between you and your brother, or you are one. There is no in-between, no other choice, and no allegiance to be split between the two. A split allegiance is but faithlessness to both, and merely sets you spinning round to grasp uncertainly at any straw that seems to hold some promise of relief. I do also think that a lot of times this is where addiction stems from our forgetfulness and from our wanting to search outside of ourselves. The book always talks about it. We search for things to allow us to feel complete instead of remembering that we've actually always been complete, that there's nothing outside of us that we need. I think that's beautiful. So to hold some promise of relief, yet who can build his home upon a straw and count on it as shelter from the wind? The body can be made a home like this because it lacks foundation in truth, and yet because it does, it can be seen as not your home, but merely as an aid to help you reach the home where light abides. With this as purpose, is the body healed. It is not used to witness the dream of separation and disease, nor is it idly blamed for what it did not do. So it's also talking about how when we forget who we truly are, this is how disease manifests in the body, through a mindset of separation and divorce, instead of wholeness and love and understanding. Of course, nobody's perfect. We're all trying our best. It serves to help the healing of light sun, and for this purpose it cannot be sick. It will not join a purpose not your own, and you have chosen that it not be sick. All miracles are based upon this choice, and given you the instant it is made. No forms of sickness are immune because the choice cannot be made in terms of form. The choice of sickness seems to be of form, yet it is one, as is opposite, and you are either sick or well accordingly. And so it says, when we come into conflict with other people and we can't figure out why, the question is to ask for the miracle, to ask, what am I not seeing? And how can I see this differently? How can I see this person differently? Because when we get caught up and we get angry at people and frustrated and stuck in that gap and separation, there's always some answer that we're trying to find or trying to be right for. And whenever we are trying to be right about something, we place guilt. That's what it talks about. We place guilt on the other person in order for our egos to feel like we are innocent. And no innocence is ever had in a relationship, because we are always 50-50%, even if it doesn't feel like it, even if what the other person did to you is like blatantly harmful, there is some sort of chemistry and belief that we have that attracts these things into our lives to be able to teach us. And Carl Jung talks a lot about that too, about the unconscious. And if we only come here to learn, and you don't have to believe this is just like, I'm just sharing ideas here, but we come here to learn about ourselves, and we can't learn about ourselves unless we have a direct reflection, and our reflection is our relationships with other people. Your home is built upon your brother's health, upon his happiness, his sinlessness, and everything his father promised him. And so, like, when you're in a relationship with somebody and all you think about is negative things about them, we share thoughts and we share hormones, and like, you're either building that person up or you're tearing them down. And I think it's so sad because the divorce rate is so high, and I think, like, of course, I always ask, it's like, where did it start? Where did the separation start? It always starts like way before, a lot of times the same thing with disease, and I talk about dementia, divorce dementia. It's like these symptoms have been like knocking on the door for a while, and then one day it has become too much. The same thing, like being in a relationship with somebody, you are like constantly picking them apart, only seeing their flaws, like always aggravated. It's never enough, and it's like we shackle them and we put them in poor health, but we also put ourselves in poor health by having these thoughts. And it's like meant to do that. Like, relationships are meant to be like a direct reflection. That's why it's called intimacy. Into me I see. And it's supposed to be a place where you're constantly seeking curiosity and forgiveness instead of always seeing the flaws. Although our society and social media especially sets us up to fail, sets us up to look externally. If something's going on in the relationship, it's always that person's fault. If I don't feel right, maybe it's because I need this, and this in order to feel, like I have a sense of peace in my life. We can never just sit still and just be happy with what we have. We're trained to always want more. And you look on social media and you're like, oh, I want to go on this trip, I want to go do this and this and this, and it's like there's so many things to do, but like hundreds of years ago, like they didn't have all this. Couldn't just call somebody up on the phone. You had to like wait to respond to someone. If you got angry, if you found out a message about somebody, you got angry, you had to like wait for that anger to pass instead of like impulsively texting or impulsively commenting. It's just, the world is very different, and our biology, our biochemistry is still in the ancient times, and that's why a lot of times we have collective dementia. Your home is built upon your brother's health, upon his happiness, his sinlessness, and everything his father promised him. No secret promise you have made, instead, has shaken the foundation of his home. The winds will blow upon it, and the rain will beat against it, but with no effect. The world will wash away, and yet this house will stand forever, for its strength lies not within itself alone. It is an ark of safety, resting on light's promise that his son is safe forever in himself. What gap can interpose itself between the safety of this shelter and its source? From here the body can be seen as what it is, and neither less nor more in worth than the extent to which it can be used to liberate light's son unto his home. And with this holy purpose is it made a home of holiness a little while, because it shares light's will with you. And it's beautiful. I'll talk about this yesterday, but in chemistry they have polar in non-polar bonds, they have water-loving bonds and then non-water-loving bonds. Polar bonds talk about that codependency relationship. They talk about that relationship where somebody always has to be wrong. Somebody always has to have control. There's an imbalance of electrons. Somebody always has to have more and less. There's like an extreme attraction. And in a non-polar bond, non-water loving, is they share electrons. So because they share electrons, there's no codependency. There's stability. It's a stable bond where this person has what they need and this person has what they need, and they come together and they just share in this place of fullness and wholeness. Whereas in the polar bond, there's always this tug and this pull. I never have enough of what I need. I rely on you for everything, validation, everything like that. There's no fulfillment, there's no wholeness. It's just codependency. So I love reading this book because it makes me think about the biochemistry and how the chemistry and everything, it always teaches us about like the story of our relationships and what is on the outside. So I really think it's beautiful. And I'll just add that I'm just posting these videos on YouTube. I'm just a girl with a bunch of theories. I could be wrong about all of this, and I'm okay with that. But I think life is so beautiful, and it always talks about it. It just says that, just by asking for the miracle, asking to see someone in a different lens, it's a miracle to see the positive and the joy in someone when all you can do is seem to pick them apart. And, they say that too. They say that judgment is really just, if you can't stop judging other people, and, it's a reflection of the internal shame that we hold. So I like this book because it's the foundation for inner peace, but it teaches about forgiveness, and especially within our relationships. I think it's so beautiful. I have read it 4 times, and like I said, I'm just going to keep reading it because it feels like I always need this. It's like our learning journey never stops. And a lot of the times, if we don't learn certain things in a particular relationship that we're in, they'll just repeat themselves, because life is like the seasons repeat themselves. Winter, summer, night, day, contract, expand. Everything is constantly pulsating, and you feel like you get to one place in life, you feel like everything's good, and then boom, things shake up and we have to learn something new. So I think that's the most beautiful part, is nothing is ever stagnant in nature. Everything is always moving, even if it doesn't feel like it's moving. I had this fig, I talked about this before, I had this little fig clipping from my friend, and I had it in the window for months, and I thought that it was dead. It didn't have this leaf on it, it was just a stick, and it had grown roots really, really fast. And I looked at it, it was sitting in the window, it had no growth. I was I had algae growing over. I was are you dead? Do I throw you away? What's going on? And I was I'll give it a few more months before I was moving. And right when I was about to move, it had this leaf pop up, and I'm kind of still waiting for it to keep growing. I probably need to put it outside, give it more sun. I got it by the window. But it's it was still growing in that time, even though I thought it was dying. That's kind of funny, It's I feel like I've felt that way before in my body, in my biology, you're just sometimes you get so stagnant with your routine and with life, and you're am I moving forward? And we have all those cells underneath our body. We have trillions of gut bacteria. It's nothing about us is still, and I think it's so beautiful. Again, it's the spirit beyond the body, the spirit beyond the mask. There's always something going on. But anyway, I hope this is helpful for you in some way, and I will catch you next time. Good luck.